Hi, thanks for joining. I'm Guy Rocourt with the Future of Cannabis. I'm here with Mara Gordon, a true OG in the industry. So excited to talk about this clean label, clean cannabis movement that we're trying to push. As you guys know, it's so important that cannabis be not demonized and that we lead the way. Does it mean that we have to try harder? Sure. But I, for one, am ready to do that. Mara, I know that you've been in the industry quite some time and have been pushing these values of plant medicine and clean concepts since day one. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just start talking about like how we might get this industry to get back on track from where it is now.
Great. Well, I'm very happy to be here. I'm very, congratulations on doing this. It makes my heart feel so good to hear anytime somebody's moving towards clean medicine. And you with your background, this is just a perfect marriage. So I first came to cannabis many years ago, searching for clean medicine and for lab tested medicine back before there was any such thing as lab testing. And so, because I came from way back then, I was been pushing always for clean. My focus is on working with people with cancer, and as a result, it's so important that it's even cleaner than in other cases. Plus, with concentration. So I've stayed very narrowly in my lane all these years. I've had other companies like Zelda's, Zelda Therapeutics that I started, and other things as well. Octopi Wellness for the software for managing the data. But at the end of the day, all that matters is anybody who's in need has access to quality medicine.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So, let's just start right from the top. You just mentioned the C word. Cancer is a very, hot topic in our industry. And one of the things that Pop and Barkley was like, if somebody called me and said, "Hey, I'm about to go into some sort of, chemotherapy," I'd be like, "Let me send you a 1 to 30 tincture because before you get on the Norcos or before you get on the antidepressants, try the cannabis alternative." I would do that because I was like, well, I know that it's gonna give them some pain management, kind of uplift their mood, but most importantly, non-addictive, non-toxic, encourages them to eat. What's been your experience with like specifically around cancer and cannabis and how this plant medicine helps compared to some of the other stuff that they're offered?
So one of the things that I do is I do a very in-depth patient intake. It's like a medical exam, and I work with doctors for oversight. And the primary question that I ask a patient is what their objective is in using cannabis. Because as you just mentioned, cannabis can help with managing side effects of chemotherapy, sleep, pain, neuropathic pain that can come from as a result of some chemotherapies, appetite, sleep. I mean, so many different things. It also has a potential for anti-tumoral. And based upon what the person asks for is how we set up a dosing protocol. So if somebody comes to me and says, I just really need help sleep, and they're, 70 years old, I might give them 2.5 milligrams of THC, 50 milligrams of CBG and send them on their way. But if somebody comes to me and says, I really want to give this a shot and see because I'm not responding to the chemo or the immunotherapy, or I've tried it all and it didn't work, or I want it to work synergistically or potential at the same time, then I would set them up on a very different protocol. And it would depend upon what type of cancer, what their objectives, and what other their comorbidities and medications that they're taking. So cannabis needs to be in the medical toolbox right along with all the other potential treatments for cancer.
Yeah, agreed. So I've always focused as a formulator on what I know, right? And because we don't have university testing and so on, it occurred to me, not right away, part of my history, I don't know if you know, I did start a company in Colorado right in 2011. And like everybody else, wanted to do light hydrocarbon, wanted to distill it down to
Right.
super concentrated. I had that kind of scarcity mindset of like, ooh, super potent cannabis, right? And also this need to wear a lab coat to kind of justify myself. But with Pop and Barkley, I was like, wait, natural medicine is what got us here. I often say what was grown in grandma's garden and made in grandma's kitchen is what, you think about the Women's Alliance. That's what we really advocated for. But now that it's legal and all this money's coming in, there's all these novel cannabinoids, all this new stuff happening. What's been your take on the race to the bottom in terms of distillate, and how do we get, I do believe, let me put it this way, I do believe that there is the future where there's a cannabis injectable that may see the reduction of tumors, but we need a lot of research. But with what we have now, when you're addressing patients, and they're talking about all these novel cannabinoids and all this nano stuff. How do you parse that, and how do you bring it back to plant medicine? Should it just be a plant medicine for now? What's your opinion on all that?
I remember when Canada was taken off, and all of a sudden you couldn't swing a cat without hitting a hydrocarbon extractor. And at the time, I was going, you guys are out of your mind. You guys are missing the entire point of this process. And now there's a whole bunch of, for sale hydrocarbon, processors up there. Everybody's, and then and I remember talking with, and I'm not going to mention the names of any of your former competitors, but they were all going CO2, which is crap. And their argument was it's just easier. And I'm like, yeah, a trained monkey can do CO2. But the problem is you still have to finish it through ethanol. So why not just get rid of the CO2 step and just go with the ethanol? Because ethanol is more complicated. It definitely requires that you understand filtration. It's more of an art, and it has to be trained. You can't just take some $10 an hour person and put them on a machine and a rotovape and let them go. They have to know what they're doing. I think that one of the benefits of the pandemic that I've seen is such a larger push for whole plant medicines and away from all these overprocessed things. I watched it for many years. I shook my head. In fact, I had Aunt Zelda's, which was all ethanol extracted, everything, even our topical, everything, and our extracts and our infused. And then when Prop 64 passed in California, I opened the oil plant as an encouragement for other companies. Let me process your thing. You can go do whatever you want with, but please at least let me give you quality product. But then by that point, it was biomass and crude. I mean, the whole vocabulary around it lost its entire. I said, anybody who ever comes to me talking about biomass, I will not respond. I just said it's not biomass. I mean, it's like, it's so disrespectful to what it really is.
Yeah.
And as all the big CPG companies moved in and they're just treating it like another SKU on their balance sheet, though I just watched it, it's broken my heart what's happened.
Yeah.
And frankly, I predicted it many years ago, and there's a lot of record of me predicting it, saying, you guys are missing the boat. The big money is on medical. They spend the money consistently. They want the regular thing. They're the one. You're focusing on, like the latest shiny object. And it's been disgusting to me to watch. And it's like, okay, so how many SKUs do you actually need to have? 3 or 4, and that's it. Not every month come out with a new one, because that's not how people use this plant. And anyway, so I'm thrilled to see the direction you're going and seeing the clean labeling and all. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, look, thank you so much for saying that. It's so funny. First, we won't mention competitors, but AC Braddock from Eden Labs, if you're out there, blessings.
Casey is
Because
my
without,
dear friend. Yeah.
wrestling with her versus CO2 and light hydrocarbon forced me to open my mind into the science. And one of the things I learned was like, yeah, wait a minute, but wait, you're talking about my residual solvents, but you refine an ethanol. And at the time, Colorado was allowing like 1,000 parts per million of ethanol. And I was like, wait, something's wrong there. Secondly, when cryoethanol came out, I was like, why not skip this $500,000 extractor and just extract into ethanol? And then, of course, eventually I got into pressing rosin. And to
Right.
your point, this notion of biomass disempowers the farmer, right? And if
Yes.
we're going to have plant medicine, the farmer has to do it right. So with Pop and Barkley, when we were doing keef and lipid infusion and rosin pressing, one of the things I would say is, if the farmer doesn't do it right, if they don't not use foliar, but cannabis is a bioremediator, so if they don't have a raised bed or clean soil, I can't use their product because I had no
Exactly.
chance to refine at all. And so the medicine actually starts at the farm. And that is a novel concept in our sick care system, right? Pharma, CPG, to your point, turmeric comes out, and now you go to buy turmeric at the supermarket or at CVS, and it's like the 15th ingredient on the label, and who knows how it
Right.
got there, right? We have an
Exactly.
opportunity as counterculture to really say, no, our medicine starts at the farm. The cultivator is the champion of our industry, and if they create great flowers, then we create formulations. I had it in my mind, and hopefully this will be our future of cannabis, where instead of doing ratios in the lab, we're encouraging farmers to grow our CBD, THC, CBN ratios right there. So again,
No,
all we have
no,
to do is shake it. No, you don't think so?
no, 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 no. I had this same discussion with, my beloved late friend Lawrence Ringo, because he would go out in the field to grow and say, okay, Mara, I got some Cinderella 99 here. What do you want me to cross it with? And I said, Cinderella 99. I'd rather have the THC, the CBD, the CBG, the THCA, et cetera, all in their whole plant form, and then allow me for a particular illness or purpose, mix it to the ratios it needs to be. Once it's in that mixture, you can't take it apart. So like to me, probably the most worthless product on the market is a 1-to-1 because THC and CBD are not dosed the same way. Until you get to about 50 milligrams of CBD, it's pretty much placebo. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with placebo. Like if it helps, great. But it's a placebo. Most people aren't going to get to 50 milligrams of THC though. So how do you get them that once you mix it together, that you've screwed up? So I would rather see that the way I did it at Aunt Zelda's is I had a group of growers and they loved to grow for me because they knew the medicine was going to children with cancer and grandmas with cancer, etc. And what I would say to them is this is what I need. This is the profile of the plant that I need. And they would grow me what I needed I need the terpene profile. I would give them, we would work together to find the genetics, to find exactly. And then sometimes I would have to mix a couple of different chemovars together to get the balance that I wanted. But I would say, as long as your medicine is clean, and I mean clean by the way I test it, not clean by the way others do, I'll buy your whole crop. And
Yeah.
so they were encouraged to do well. But absolutely, it all started with them. I don't really like the idea of all these mixtures, though. They don't make any sense to me.
I
Not when you're producing medicine. Maybe if you're flower to vape or to smoke or whatever, but to make a medicine, as soon as you combine it, you take away the power.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, yeah, that's really interesting. But I love what you said about the CBD dosing and the dosing, right? So recently, I'd read the research on CBG. I hadn't really partaken. And then recently, as I'm coming out with this new product, I started, well, I want to do a CBG for focus. And I started thinking about the dosing. Well, somebody my size, I'm taking 200 milligrams and it does work. I have to tell you, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when I start to feel like a little bit like, but it's too late for coffee, I hit up 200 milligrams for these 50 milligram capsules that I have. And yeah, it just cuts the brain fog a little bit. But who would have thought 200 milligrams of a cannabinoid, right? I'm also 200 plus pounds. And I think that, THC kind of has overshadowed the dosing where everybody thinks they can sell 1 or 2 milligrams of something and it's going to do it. I think when it comes to CBD and CBG, and CBC for that matter, you need a lot of milligrams, right? Yeah, with THC, you may only need 2 or 3
They're
milligrams.
not dosed the same way. I
Not at
just got
all.
off of a call with one of my patients who has neuroendocrine tumor with mets into his liver. And I have him on THC, CBD, CBG, and THCV for a particular reason that he has because of a comorbidity with blood sugar. And he's on 100 milligrams a day of THC. He didn't start at 100. He started at 1.25 and then went to 2.5 and then went to 5 and then 10. And I got him up to it to now he's still functioning, still has his life, and he's on 100 milligrams. But he's trying to kill stage 4 cancer,
Yeah, it's
right?
a whole different thing.
So
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'll tell you, it's interesting thing that you brought up your weight. And so I think it's important because, I've been collecting this data on patients all these years. I have tens of thousands of data points, hundreds of thousands. And the one thing that we have found is that there's zero correlation between your weight and the dose.
Oh, okay. That's
It has more,
interesting.
yeah, it has more to do with your age. So the younger people take higher doses. I mean, I might have a small child, but I have 700 milligrams a day, and somebody who's 70 years old that's on 50 milligrams a day for the same thing.
Wow.
So it's really there's zero correlation in the data because I've had women that were skin and bones use more than big giant jocks. So it's
That's awesome. I would have never thought that. Thank you for
right.
sharing that.
In
That's
fact, if you look at some of the reports, like I watch some of these doctors that are trying to make themselves into a little bit of cannabis celebrities, and so they're using kind of funky data, and they'll say, "Oh, it's between 2 and 20 milligrams per kilo." Well, that's a hell of a range between 2 and 20. So if somebody weighs 40 kilos, I mean, in other words, how do I know how to dose them based upon your information? I don't. So it's really important that we just start very low, we have a clear objective, and we increase slowly till we get to meet our target.
Yeah, no, agreed. And that titration and like the ramping up of dosing is something that we definitely should talk about. Many times people are scared of THC or they do too much and have an adverse effect. But then all of a sudden, like I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong in your experience, that like other analgesics, THC will do what it needs to do to, if you have stage 4 cancer, whatever's going on with you. I remember Montel with his MS, he would take up to like 400 and 500 milligrams of THC, but still have
Right,
this photographic memory. And before
right,
going out on stage, take these huge doses of THC so that it
right,
would kind of ease his MS so that he could walk without tripping, but yet
right,
would be super clear, remembering dozens of people's personal stories. You know how he likes to tell their personal
right,
stories, make people
right,
cry. And it would be like this amazing thing because most people think about more than 100 milligrams of THC and sleeping for days. But I think
right,
there's a way where if you have an ailment, sure, you can't start there, but you should kind of like with the help of somebody start to titrate and realize that 1, 2, 3 milligrams may not help, and then eventually you take a little bit more, you take a little bit more. I see it like in some of the older folks that were truly reticent, they didn't take it, and the Pop and Barkley sleep gummy only has 4 milligrams of THC, and at first it worked, then it was like slowing down. I was like, well, I'll take 1.5. And then usually they settle on 2. And like all of a sudden they're like, wow, I can't believe I'm taking almost 10 milligrams of THC. It's like, yeah, but you're
right.
using it for a purpose. You've titrated it so that your body knows how to deal with it. And now it works. So let me ask you a question. With all this stuff happening in cannabis, and we see what a lot of this CPGs happening, a lot of what CPGs trying to do, and there's this desperate need to make it recreational v medical. And I remember Montel years ago, I have to give him credit. He said to me, when this adult use things happens, patients are going to be left behind. And I think that's been
Yeah,
accurate.
we all said that. Yeah,
Yeah, because the
right.
money is like so gravitational to recreational. But as a regular cannabis user for years, to me, cannabis is wellness. I think if I didn't use cannabis on a regular basis the way I have, I probably would have gotten prescribed some other pharma med to either keep me calm or help me not stress and pull my hair out or something, right? And so I think when you use cannabis regularly, it does become a wellness lifestyle. It's not like drinking regularly. I don't believe it's the same. So I don't really partake in this recreational v medical. I think it's a false narrative that these
Yeah.
people are doing. What do you think about that?
Okay.
Is there a
I
middle?
actually, yeah, I give a lecture on this. In fact,
Oh,
I'll
okay.
email you. I actually give a regular lecture on this, and I gave one just now in Brazil. I gave 3 lectures and recorded 4 classes while I was there. And it's on the medical versus recreational. And what I believe is that I'll go ahead and give the punchline that there's a third one, wellness. I have medical, recreational, which some people call adult use. I don't know when recreating became an evil word. I love recreational as a word. It makes sense. But I have medical, recreational, and wellness. The wellness, okay, let me do it in another order. Imagine you're walking into a CVS, okay? The front of the store is going to be like the candy and the junk and the sugars and the wine and all the stuff they have. That's the recreational. Then you go back towards the pharmacy and they have all the OTC stuff. You have a headache, you self-medicate. You hurt your knee, you might buy a Tiger Balm, whatever it is. That's the wellness. That's the generally healthy person who just needs a little something because they hurt their shoulder playing tennis or whatever it is. And then you have your really sick people and they go to the pharmacy and they go there to get help. Their doctor sent them whatever to pick up a prescription, in this case, the cannabis. So when I say it's about intention, a medical patient is looking to diminish. A medical patient wants to get rid of the anxiety. They want to get rid of the pain. They want to get rid of the inability to sleep. They want to diminish. They want to lessen. A recreational, I see, is more enhancing. I see that more as having a larger experience. You know, you go out, you're going to be able to, I mean, it's a theory. And then wellness is to maintain. And it's, you can do something you can do yourself. So that's really the categories that I put them into. And back to your point about why they're doing this on all the CPGs, I spoke at a pharmaceutical conference back in 2018. It was just a regular pharmaceutical conference. And I listened to the way that these drug companies are looking to develop products. They have to find their novel chemical, or they have to find the pathway specifically for that. And none of that language works around cannabis because your cannabinoid receptors go out throughout your body. There's no such thing as targeting specifically with cannabinoids. Though I do say that THC is an agonist and CBD is a mild antagonist, so we can do things with the timing. But like you said, if you need it, you're not going to get as high. Once a person's well, let's say they're sick, they have terrible pain, and they use cannabis at a high dose, and they're able to still function. When they no longer need that because the pain is gone, that same dose is going to make them way high.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, I should also mention, we just kind of jumped right into it, but yeah, you've done TED Talks, like, you are an OG in the space and you've been basically sharing this information with us for quite some time. And thank you for that. And it's appreciated. And I do believe in that wellness category as well, right? It's like,
Right, right.
at Pop and Barkley, our last campaign before we sold it to our friends at Mammoth was all cannabis is wellness, right? It's like, yes, there's, and part of that was part of where we got stuck in our origin story. We started like more medical, right? We were looking to do topicals and CBD tinctures and pain management tinctures. We opened up that conversation with seniors. We were known for busing seniors to really
Right,
have them participate in this, trying to
right,
get them off the Oxycontins and some of the toxic things that they were on where cannabis just totally fit. And then when it came to get into gummies and other products, some of the folks were like, well, that's not medical, that you're out of your lane. And I was like, but this is just a way to take the cannabis. I had foolishly, when cannabis first became legal in Colorado, I thought edibles would go away. I was like, well, that was just a way to mask cannabinoids. Capsules will be the way. And clearly, when somebody wants something fun to eat, I get it now. It's an experience. But at the end of the day, the purpose of cannabis is, to your point, wellness, right? Like if you need it a little bit because you're just like a little sore, or if
right,
you have cancer, it's about what you need. It's a very personal thing, but fundamentally the THC itself or the CBD itself or the cannabis itself, it's hard to put it in a box. It has to do with how you, the user, uses it. And that is different than, let's say, pharma, right? Because pharma will give you like some sort of steroidal cream or Tiger Balm, right? It's either one or the other, either really
right,
extreme acute or mild. And cannabis is kind of in the middle. And I think it is because of our endocannabinoid system, our body knows what to do with this natural plant medicine, right?
right.
That's
Yeah,
super, super important. I
right.
want to go back a little bit to when we were talking about the extraction methodologies and whole plant and whatnot. I am a big proponent of whole plant, and I'm hearing that you are too. And I
Oh,
think a lot
yes.
of folks don't realize that the gift of cannabis right now, the gift of legalization is abundance. And these trichomes, where all the medicine is located, for some reason somebody hasn't realized that, are right there on the surface, which means mechanical separation. We can just shake it like they used to. Or my favorite is to soak it in a fat or a lipid and do a lipid infusion, which draws out not just the cannabinoids and the terpenes, but some of those other plant fats and some of that green material. In your experience, these whole plant formulations, have you seen a marked difference between them and, let's say, what pharma would do in terms of distillate or active
Oh,
pharmaceutical ingredients?
yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because there's such a tremendous, they don't even belong in the same zip code. They're so different. I mean, what we did at Aunt Zelda's is we would keep out the plant and then make the extraction, with ethanol extraction from that. Um, and we were an R&D company. We were never in the dispensaries, any of that. We were always about controlling the narrative with the patient so that we could get the data because I'm a process engineer. I want the data. But as far as the difference in the extraction, I'm going to give you a an anecdotal example, and I don't usually do that because, an N of one, but it wasn't more than an N of one, but this is a particular example. We had a patient that had triple negative breast cancer years ago. And I don't know if you remember this, but back when the whole scam of Charlotte's Web came to California, and the way that they did it was just so unethical and so horrible in the way that they came into the market. And what they ended up doing is there ended up being a CBD shortage in California,
Wow.
briefly. So patients, I mean, I remember dress wedding going to them and saying, Stanley's, and saying, please, let me just provide to these people in the meantime. And they're like, nope, nope, nope. It's either Charlotte's Web or it doesn't work, which is such utter BS. But we all know that, of course. So, but I had patients that could not get CBD, and we couldn't get the flower to process it. But one of the competitors in this market, who's very nice, from Sonoma County, was also growing ACDC and processing it under their label with CO2. So I had no choice. I would just tell these patients, this is what you're going to have to use in the meantime. The cancer markers went up, the dosing had to keep going up. And once we went back to whole plant medicine, she improved exponentially. My biggest complaint with CO2 medicine, besides the fact that it's just crap, is the fact that you cannot stay at a single dose. You have to continuously increase your dose because you become tolerant to it. With whole plant medicine, you can be at the same dose for years because there's going to be slight variances from batch to batch, and your body is going to have to acclimate to that. Not in huge, it's like not going from Granddaddy Purple to Sour Diesel, but if Granddaddy Purple to Granddaddy Purple, there's going to be some slight variances in it that your body is going to be stressed over in a positive way. And so you're able to, if you have somebody who's at, 15 milligrams to go to sleep, they can probably stay at that same dose for years and years. It's such a better business plan to give people the same thing over and over again than to constantly think that you have to do something different because, the myth of everybody just wanting more THC, that's the recreational patient or user. They walk into a dispensary, they're going to spend $75. A medical patient's going to walk in and spend $600, $700, $800. And that's the other thing. And they're going to do it month after month after month. So the whole myth of the rec user being where all the money is, it's just a bunch of companies trying to apply CPG methodologies to a plant that doesn't match. It just doesn't match at all.
100%. I've said this same thing. And, one of my good marketing friends, Angela, who's, came in from CPG and became a real cannabis person, is out there doing the good work now. She had said, the wellness shelf is a prize shelf. One, mom usually buys what's on the wellness shelf, what's in the medicine.
Right.
And that is the thing. You will go to another store. Like you might get a different brand of bread, but you will not get a different brand of your wellness product. You'll go to another vendor and make sure that you find it because it's important. But there's this consistency thing that you bring up. I want to ask you, I know that most doctors, when I'm trying to talk to them and they want to talk down to me, they do, is this consistency thing like, well, plant medicine isn't consistent batch to batch, and that's not how we do things. And I'm like, but the side effects of pharma are also not particularly good. I'll take the
Right.
inconsistency of our non-toxic plant any day. How have you wrestled with these doctors in terms of saying, well, yeah, it is a little bit of variance batch to batch, and so what?
Well, the first thing is pharmaceuticals are allowed to have a certain amount of content within them that isn't included. So there's other stuff even in pharmaceuticals that are not listed. So it's BS that it's a single molecule. Okay, that's the starter point. But what I do to them is I say, okay, the way that medicine has been made for over 10,000 years versus how it's been made for 100 years is so everything that was wrong in the entire history is wrong because you can't market it as a single molecule. Think about it. Think about why these things, like why did Bayer start making aspirin instead of willow bark? Why did some of these things start happening? It was purely convenience and money. It was not because it was better. And I believe that people have variances within lots of things because I don't believe that cannabis belongs in side by side with the pharmaceutical industry. My big push is for the nutraceutical industry. And when I order my curcumin, it's slightly different each month. Sometimes it's oranger, sometimes it's browner, depending on the particular batch. And this can say the same thing about many nutraceuticals. So stop trying to make it fit into this box where it doesn't belong, because cannabis is not a pharmaceutical. And what I say to people is, if it was a good pharmaceutical and if it worked the way that you're saying with single molecule, Durabinol has already been approved. It would be being sold on street corners everywhere. Like, hey man, you want to score some Marinol? I mean, nobody wants to score a single molecule because it's crap. It's terrible. So that's pretty much, I just tell doctors that I understand and I appreciate and I feel badly for you. I always empathize with them because you were not taught this in medical school, what a shame that is. You also weren't taught about nutrition. You also weren't taught about pharmacology. There's a lot of things in medical schools you weren't, and the endocannabinoid system happens to be one of them, and a single molecule doesn't work as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So look, that's going to be our time. And I want to thank you so much for sharing the knowledge. And, I want to give you an opportunity to make a final point, but I do want to reiterate to folks that like doctors are not even required to take nutrition to be doctors. Most general practitioners out there may not have gone to the nutrition textbooks and may not understand that food is medicine and how food works in the body. And, as a society that's dealing with obesity, dealing with diabetes, dealing with an uptick of so many autoimmune diseases in the last 100 years, you would think that nutrition and what we're eating is right there. But when you go to the doctor, they're so inclined and programmed to just give you a pill instead of making you do the hard work of cleaning up your diet or maybe exercising. I can't. I hope everybody that's listening is realizing that yes, they're learned. Yes, they spend a lot of money to go to school, but they don't know everything. And talk about do your own research and kind of like help heal yourself. Super important. But before we part, thank you again, Mara. If you had my final closing question is, we have the DEA about to reschedule. Hopefully, we are going to have a great, positive new administration to move our union forward. What would you say to those folks, those new regulators, when it comes to cannabis? I know you already hinted on it being nutraceutical, but what would you say to them as a closing to like get this done?
I would have them look at the fact that there is no known overdose. There's no level of use of cannabis where you're going to die. There's lack of cleanliness. There's in the products, there's all sorts of other problems that could cause it, but it's not the cannabis itself. And so instead, spend their efforts on regulating the cleanliness and the lab testing and not worrying so much about which cannabinoid somebody's going to have and how many milligrams and whether it's it's just silly. They're focusing on the wrong things. So I'm actually the head of the Science and Medical Council for the Council for Federal Cannabis Regulation. And we meet regularly with the FDA and we talk about having this go on to the nutraceutical track and admit that they don't know how to do it. And that would be really nice for a change, just to admit that they don't know how. And I don't see them doing that yet because they are trying to put the cannabis into the pharmaceutical box and it just doesn't fit.
Yeah, well, look, I, for one, without getting too political, am ready for the matriarchy. And I think that hopefully a leader that doesn't have the ego in front will be able to admit that sometimes we need to relook at things. I'm hopeful. But thank you again, Mar. For those of you guys who are listening to the future of cannabis, please look up Miss Mara Gordon. Tons of TED Talks have been dropping education on this on our community from day one. I thank you for sharing all this information with us. I learned something, which is I'm always excited to do. Thank you for that. And yeah, thanks for being with me. I'm Guy Rocourt, you guys. If you're enjoying this content, please follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on our clean label. I do believe that cannabis can be the vanguard for changing some of these systemic problems in cannabis. And I mean, in our wellness, in our medical structure. I think that we may have started as counterculture, but because of us having to try harder for legitimacy, we can also expose how others have been skating by in terms of healthcare, in terms of nutrition. So that's my little view for the future. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening. And Mara, thank you. It's been a pleasure meeting you. And I hope that we get to chat again soon.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.